Welcome back to Inhibition. Today's topic, Kyle Rittenhouse. We're going to do an update. There's a new video the prosecution has released. Some people are saying is very bad for Kyle Rittenhouse's defense case. We're going to take a look at that video. We're going to look at what the motion that the prosecution filed, and we're going to see, does this really harm Kyle? It's time we talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. So glad you're here. We're going to jump into this topic, but before we do, if you're new here, we post videos every week. Down below, you can hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, especially if you want to stay up to date with the Kyle Rittenhouse case. I will continue covering the Kyle case, and we'll cover the trial when it happens in November. So if you want to stay up to date, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let's jump into the video here. So there is this new video out that the prosecution has come across. They have sent it to the judge in a motion, and they want this video clip to be shown in court as evidence. We'll look at what they say in their motion about it in just a moment, but I figured we'd start off right away and let's just look at the video. What does the actual video show?
It looks like one of them has a weapon. She hung up. Bro, I wish I had that. I'd start shooting rounds at them.
As you can see in that video, it's about 16 seconds long. It's obviously part of a larger video, but it has been cut, what has been released. Now, I don't know if the prosecution has more of that video. That's not clear from the motion. We're gonna look at the motion that the prosecution filed, but it is not clear how long of a video clip they actually have, or how they got this video. But let's go ahead and talk about real quickly just a brief overview of what you just saw in that video. He explains it here in the opening section of his motion. The state of Wisconsin, by Assistant District Attorneys Thomas C. Binger and James S. Krause, hereby moves the court to admit to evidence that on August 10th, 2020, so they're claiming this took place on August 10th. That is 15 days before the shooting. On August 10th, 2020, the defendant was recorded on video stating, "Bro, I wish I had my blanking AR. I'd start shooting rounds at them." After pulling over to the side of the road to watch several individuals who were leaving a CVS pharmacy across the street. Now, what the motion doesn't say right there is that it sounds like someone says, and it sounds like the same person on the video says it looks like they have a weapon.
Janie's got a gun. Janie Briggs got a gun.
He's got a gun! Janie's got a gun!
And then they say, "I wish I had my AR. I'd start shooting rounds at them." That's the basis, or kind of a summary of that short video clip. Now they're saying that that person on the video is Kyle. The video doesn't show Kyle. There is no person. The person talking is not in the video. All you hear is a voice. We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but let's just keep going through the motion. So it says the defendant apparently believed with no actual evidence that these individuals were shoplifting from the store. There is no indication that the defendant had any idea who these people were or what they were doing. The defendant had no connection whatsoever with the CVS pharmacy and did not know anyone who was there. The defendant was watching the situation from a vehicle parked across the street and had no actual interaction with anyone involved in the incident. Quite simply, the defendant saw something, jumped to a conclusion based on exactly zero facts, and then threatened to kill someone based on his baseless assumption and wrongful interpretation. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out in that paragraph, but before I get to the specifics here, Binger is trying to build this case, this idea that Kyle had no idea what was actually going on and just jumped to conclusions. That's kind of the image that he's trying to portray from this video. But there's some questions that we should be asking based on what Binger has put into this motion. First, he says the defendant believed with no actual evidence that they were shoplifting. Well, how does he know that the person who made this, which he's claiming to be Kyle, the person who said this, had no actual evidence that they were shoplifting? How does Binger know that? How does he know what happened before the video came on? Is there a longer video where they say there was no actual evidence that they're just assuming? How does he know that they had no actual evidence? Going from there, it says there's no indication that the defendant had any idea who these people were or what they were doing. How does he know that? He says there's no indication. Okay, does that mean that he absolutely didn't know who these people were or what they were doing? Or is that just meaning that you assume he doesn't know? If there's just because there's no indication doesn't mean he doesn't know, right? Just because he doesn't indicate in the video that he doesn't know doesn't mean he doesn't actually know. So how do you know that he doesn't know who they are or what they're doing? Then he says the defendant had no connection whatsoever to the CVS pharmacy and did not know anyone who was there. How does the prosecution know that? How does the prosecution know that he has no connection to that CVS? And how does he know that he doesn't know anyone? Again, these are all assumptions that Binger is making. Now, he may have evidence that would lead him to these assumptions, but he didn't put any of that evidence in his motion. So his motion, based on his motion alone, which is what he should be providing the evidence in, so that way the judge could rule on his motion effectively, he's not adding any of that evidence, which would indicate that he likely has no evidence, and these are just the claims he's trying to make to build a case. He also says, quite simply, the defendant saw something, jumped to a conclusion based on exactly 0 facts. Okay, how do you know he jumped to the conclusion based on no facts? How do you know what the facts are? How do you know what he saw before what you see on the video? How do you know what leads you to the idea that he had 0 facts and jumped to a conclusion? Then he says, and then he threatened to kill someone based on his baseless assumption and wrongful interpretation. Baseless assumption. How do you know it was a baseless assumption? How do you know it was the wrong interpretation? But really, a bigger issue to me here is the word threatened. He says he threatened to kill someone based on his baseless assumption. Kyle did not threaten anyone. And I think this is an important point. Binger puts in this motion that Kyle threatened. Saying an offhand comment about something you wish is not the same as a threat. Now keep in mind, we're talking this is a legal document. So this is a motion in the court. This is a legal document. So when he uses the word threatened, we're talking about legally here. We're talking about legal words being used in this legal document. In Kenosha, or specifically in Wisconsin, there is no specific statute for threatening. It more falls under the disorderly conduct statute. I'm not going to pull that up in this video, but you can go research it and look at it. But ultimately, what it boils down to, if you follow the rabbit trail of what it means to be a true threat or a legal threat, it's not just making an offhand comment about something you wish. There's a lot of standards of mens rea that prove it's a threat. It's a long, drawn out, complicated, complex series of tests to determine whether it was a true threat. But the point is, Kyle didn't make a threat. He didn't say he was going to take a gun and shoot them. He didn't go get a gun and act like he was going to shoot them. He didn't even have a gun on him. There was no possibility for that statement to actually have played out in reality, and therefore it's legally not a threat. So for him to say he threatened to kill someone is wrong. He's making an offhand comment here. Now, before I go any further, I want to point out, people make comments like this. How many times have you heard someone, oh, I just want to punch him in the face? Does that mean that they're actually going to go up and punch someone in the face? Or how many times have you heard someone say, oh, I hate that person, I just wish they'd die? Or I just want to kill my boss. Statements like that. Again, not saying that these are good statements that people should make. I'm just pointing out that people make offhand comments like this, and it doesn't actually mean that they intend to do anything or have the state of mind where they actually would do these things in reality. Now keep that in mind as we keep going. So we've seen, so far in the motion, we've seen the video and him addressing what was said in the video. And now we've seen him trying to build this case that Kyle's just jumping to conclusions.
It was a jump to conclusions, Matt. You see, it would be this mat that you would put on the floor and would have different conclusions written on it. that you could jump to.
That is the worst idea I've ever heard in my life, Tom.
Yes, it's horrible, this idea.
And jumping to this idea of lethal force based on nothing. Okay, keep that in mind. Now let's keep going. Let's look at the next part of the motion. So it says the defendant's understanding of the proper use of his AR. Don't know why he has that in quotation marks. AR stands for armor light rifle. It's AR-15 is just it's a type of gun, so people shorten that to AR. Don't know why that's in quotation.
Rachel, can I just stop you right there for a second? When people do this, I don't really know what that means.
But the use of his AR and of deadly force is crucial to this case, and this video demonstrates that the defendant was eager to use deadly force in an unlawful situation. A couple of things I want to point out in this. First, he's trying to say that Kyle did not know when deadly force was justified, or when it was justifiable. So he's trying to say he doesn't have understanding of the proper use of his AR and when deadly force should be used. He's just eager to use deadly force in an unlawful situation where it wasn't justified to use it. And that's the argument he's trying to make. He's saying that Kyle did not know when deadly force was justifiable. Trying to set this idea that when Kyle went to the protest, he doesn't know when deadly force is justifiable or not. That's what he's trying to say. But that's absolutely irrelevant. That is irrelevant. This whole statement right here is completely irrelevant. And I'll tell you why. The issue isn't, did Kyle know when deadly force was justifiable? The issue is, did Kyle use deadly force justifiably? Big difference in these two things. Kyle could be completely ignorant on when legally deadly force is justifiable and still use deadly force justifiably in a given situation. Kyle doesn't have to know that deadly force was justifiable in order for it to turn out based on the circumstances that it was. For example, it's kind of like if I'm driving down the road and I don't know the speed limit on the road. You can argue that I am ignorant or don't have the knowledge of what the speed limit is. But that doesn't mean I'm actually speeding. Let's say the speed limit was 55 miles an hour and I didn't know that, but I happened to be driving 55 miles an hour. I got lucky and I was driving 55 miles an hour. Therefore, I was not breaking the law, even though I didn't know what the speed limit was.
You gotta ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
It's the same concept. Kyle doesn't have to know that deadly force was justifiable for it to be justifiable. So to argue that Kyle has a lack of knowledge in this area doesn't matter. All that matters is when he actually pulled the trigger, was deadly force actually justifiable? And the evidence clearly shows that it was. Let's keep looking more at the motion. Next part of the motion, it says there's no dispute that the defendant brought his AR, which is actually a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 semi-automatic rifle. He specifies that as if that's not an AR. So a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 semi-automatic rifle is an AR-15 rifle. But he's making a classification here that clearly shows Binger doesn't actually know much about guns. But anyways, moving on. There's no dispute that the defendant brought his AR to downtown Kenosha on August 25th, 2020. Correct. There's no dispute about that. The defendant joined a group of other armed men at the Car Source auto dealership located at, and gives the address, with the alleged intent to protect the property from looting or arson. I want you to notice what Binger is actually doing. It appears as if he's just stating some basic facts, but I want you to notice this. I'm going to point this out and hopefully you'll see this. Notice what he's doing. First, he says there is no dispute that the defendant brought his AR, his gun, joined a group of people who are also armed at the car dealership. Then notice what he says. With the alleged intent to protect the property from looting or arson. Binger is trying to link this idea that Kyle took his AR, joined with other people with ARs, to protect the property from looting or arson with his AR. He's trying to link this idea that Kyle was saying in that video, that he wanted to use his AR to shoot at the people looting, and now he's trying to argue that he had his AR for the purpose of protecting the property from looting. He's trying to make that connection that, oh, Kyle took the gun for the purpose of shooting looters. But that's not what the evidence actually shows. In my video that I did about the evidence of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, which I'll link in the description below, in that video I go through the evidence that shows Kyle was not there to use the gun to protect the property or to shoot looters. He was there with the gun for self-defense purposes. He explicitly states that in an interview he did that very night. And we'll talk about that and more in a moment. So Binger is trying to link him having an AR to him wanting to shoot looters at that property. He's trying to make a connection to what we see in that video, or not see, but what we hear in that video, to what happened in Kenosha. But the evidence doesn't support his attempt at a link here. Then he goes on and he says, this occurred 2 nights after a white Kenosha police officer shot a black man in the back, triggering protests by many people who felt that a white police officer had once again shot an unarmed black man. Unfortunately, some individuals took advantage of those protests to loot and set fire to numerous properties and businesses around Kenosha, including another car source location across the street. On the evening of August 25th, 2020, the car source business was not open for business and had no employees present. Couple things here I want to point out that Binger is doing that I think is absolutely disgusting. Notice he starts off with saying this occurred 2 nights after a white Kenosha police officer shot a black man. He even adds in the back. Why do you specify the race of the people involved? Why not say this occurred 2 nights after Jacob Blake was shot? We all know what happened with Jacob Blake. I promise you, the judge knows what happened with Jacob Blake. But you're specifying white police officer and black man shot in the back.
Well, professional race hustlers are people who incite or promote division and fear-mongering to exploit racial and ethnic tensions in order to advance some personal, political, ideological, financial, or other agenda.
For a political purpose. Again, this is showing Binger's political motivations in all of this. And then, this is just something I think is funny. He talks about the white Kenosha police officer shooting a black man, and then he said it triggered the protest by people who felt that a white police officer had once again shot an unarmed black man. 2 things here. A, they didn't just feel that the white officer had shot a black man. That part's clear. He says that it shot an unarmed black man. Jacob Blake wasn't unarmed. It doesn't matter that they felt he was unarmed. He wasn't. All of this is irrelevant detail to Kyle. This is trying to paint this racial divide. Again, this kind of goes back to him wanting to link Kyle as being against the people supporting black men. This is again just a slight, it's very subtle, but it's a slight attempt to try to paint Kyle as that white supremacist figure that he's been trying to do. But then he goes on and he says something down here that I think is interesting. He says car source was not open for business. No, that's correct, it wasn't. But then he says there were no employees present. How does he know that? How does he know that not a single person there on that property, up on the roof, down below, the door was open, people were going in and out? Could it be that someone who worked there unlocked it? I don't know. How does he know that no employees were present? He just made that up. And then he has this statement. The defendant's state of mind at the time that he shot and killed 2 unarmed individuals on August 25th, 2020, and shot and severely injured a 3rd person is a critical issue in this case. The video, and I want you to point out state of mind there. He's talking about the defendant's state of mind, Kyle's state of mind. The video from only 15 days earlier on August 10th, 2020 provides crucial insight into that issue. It shows that the defendant eagerly made assumptions about the intentions of others, even though he knew absolutely nothing about what was going on. The video also demonstrates that the defendant fervently sought to insert himself as an armed vigilante into situations that had nothing to do with him. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the video proves that the defendant was ready and willing to use deadly force in a situation where it was completely unjustified. There is no lawful privilege for anyone to use deadly force to prevent property loss or stop a suspected shoplifter. Now, I want to point out a couple things. Number one, he's talking about the state of mind, and he says this only happened 15 days earlier. Only 15 days earlier. Now, he acts like because 15 days early is not that long of a time frame, that makes it clear it's relevant because it's only 15 days earlier. We'll talk about time frame in just a moment, but I want to point out that Kyle made this statement, if it's even him, we'll talk about that in a moment, but if it's even Kyle made this statement about a specific situation at a specific CVS 15 days before the protest, which means Kyle had no way of knowing that protests would exist because Jacob Blake hadn't even been shot yet. So he's saying that this state of mind that he had 15 days earlier must be the exact same state of mind he had at the protest. But how does he know that? Where is the evidence that he had that same state of mind? How does he know that when the video ended, his friends that were in the car with him explained, hey, that would be illegal and here's why, you shouldn't do that, and Kyle understood and then changed his state of mind so that way by the time he got to the protest, he had a completely different state of mind? How does he know? There has to be evidence linking that state of mind from 15 days earlier to the protest, or it doesn't work. He says that this proves crucial insight into the issue of Kyle's state of mind. Then he says it shows that Kyle eagerly made assumptions about the intentions of others, even though he knew absolutely nothing about what was going on. Again, we've already established, how does he know that Kyle made assumptions? How does he know that he knew absolutely nothing about what was going on? How does he know that?
I can read your mind. Yeah, really. Pick a color. Blue. Pick a number, 17.
He also says that Kyle wanted to fervently insert himself, or he fervently sought to insert himself as an armed vigilante. No, Kyle did not fervently seek to insert himself as an armed vigilante. Kyle fervently seeking to actually insert himself as an armed vigilante would have meant him going back and getting his gun and coming back and inserting himself. He didn't seek to insert himself. An offhand statement about something he wished is not fervently seeking to insert yourself. That is completely sloppy language, and I say sloppy, knowing Binger it wasn't sloppy, he's just lying. He did not fervently seek to insert himself in anything. Also, he uses that word vigilante because he's trying to carry the idea through that Kyle was being a vigilante in Kenosha at the protest. Talk about that in a moment. Then he says that the video also proves that Kyle was ready and willing to use deadly force in a situation where it was completely unjustified. And my question is, who cares? Who cares what he was ready and willing to do 15 days earlier? The question is not, was he willing to use deadly force when it was unjustified? The question is, was the deadly force he actually used justified? It doesn't matter what he was willing to do in a completely different situation. Even in his situation, it doesn't matter what he was willing to do. What matters is what he did do. Did he act in self-defense? Did he unjustifiably use lethal force, or was it justified? That's what matters, not whether or not he was willing to use deadly force when it wasn't justified. Also, he says this: there was no lawful privilege for anyone to use deadly force to prevent property loss or stop a suspected shoplifter. Who cares? Kyle didn't use deadly force to prevent property loss or stop a suspected shoplifter, so it's a completely irrelevant statement. Kyle used deadly force when he was personally, physically being assaulted, not when someone was shoplifting or damaging property. That is a complete irrelevant statement. But he's trying to use this idea that Kyle was acting as a vigilante in Kenosha. That's why he uses that phrase, armed vigilante. And see, we know he wanted to be a vigilante because he said this 15 days earlier. So that must mean he was a vigilante, and that must mean it was unjustified. No, just wanting to shoot someone, making a statement that you want to shoot someone, doesn't make shooting someone 15 days later unjustified. He also says this is the most important point. So his most important point is a completely irrelevant point, because the issue isn't whether Kyle was willing to use deadly force when it was unjustified, and the issue isn't whether he used deadly force to prevent property loss. The issue is, was he justified in using deadly force when he was attacked? Binger is saying the most important part of this entire thing is a completely irrelevant point. Then finally, to the last part we're going to read on the motion, it says this evidence is being introduced for a proper purpose, namely to show the defendant's intent, motive, plan, and knowledge on August 25th, 2020. Now here's where Binger is just flat out wrong. Where does he find the intent for something that happened 15 days later in this statement? All this actually shows intent and motive for is intent or motive for stopping looters at that CVS. You can't claim intent from a time period when Kyle didn't even know the protest would exist. You can't say, see, what he said about this CVS 15 days ago must have been his intent for what he did in Kenosha, even though he had no idea that the protest would even exist in Kenosha when he made that statement. That's not how intent works. Could it go to state of mind? Yes, but you would have to have some kind of evidence to link that to his state of mind at the protest. But yes, it could go to state of mind, but not intent. Intent and state of mind are not the same thing. Also, it doesn't say anything about a plan that he had going into the protest. He's just making that up. And then as far as knowledge, he's referring back to that idea that Kyle didn't have adequate knowledge or understanding of knowing when deadly force was justified. That's completely irrelevant, because you don't have to know when it is justified for the actions to actually be justified. So that's irrelevant. He also says it goes directly to his state of mind at the time of the shootings. Well, it goes directly to state of mind, but you have to provide evidence that that was his state of mind at the time of the shootings. Again, what if after making that statement in the video, his friends explained to him why that's a bad statement and why that doesn't work and why it's illegal, and his entire state of mind changed before he ever went to the protest? How do you know that that was the same state of mind he had at the protest? You don't know. So you can't claim that that absolutely was his state of mind at the protest. Then he says, finally, its probative value significantly outweighs any undue prejudice to the defendant, to Kyle. Probative value is just the ability of a piece of evidence to make a relevant disputed point more or less true. In other words, he's trying to say that the probative value of this evidence outweighs, or the evidence making his claim more true, which it doesn't, outweighs any undue prejudice to the defendant. In other words, if we show this to the court, it might prejudice the jury into thinking Kyle is a bad person, or it might prejudice the jury against Kyle. And he's saying that the value of the probative value, that value that he gets showing that his claim that Kyle was acting as a vigilante and therefore it was unjustified, it makes it more true. It doesn't make it more true. The statement does not help his case at all, as I've already detailed in this video. So no, the probative value does not significantly outweigh any undue prejudice. If I were the judge, I would deny the motion on that fact alone. Also, the video contains the defendant's own words. It is close to the time and events of this case, and it pertains the use of his gun in a situation quite similar to the one at hand. No, it doesn't. So it is close to the events of the case in the sense that it is 15 days away, which isn't that long. But it does not pertain to the use of his gun in the similar situation. Kyle using his gun to shoot people who are violently assaulting him is not a similar situation to people looting a CVS without Kyle having any actual interaction with them.
One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell?
Those are not similar in any way. Also, in order to claim it as similar, you'd have to provide evidence that Kyle went to the protest with a gun for the purpose of shooting looters, which you have no evidence of. So it's not a similar situation. You're assuming the intent on August 25th and then saying that your assumed intent is similar to the intent he had on August 10th. You can't assume intent, you have to actually demonstrate it. And then so they request that the court grants this motion. This will be ruled on in September at the same time the judge rules on the other motions that have been filed. But there's one thing I want to point out. He claims that this is evidence of Kyle wanting to shoot looters and his state of mind, but there is evidence from the very day of the shootings that contradicts that. So we're going to look at that just real quickly. I'm not going to go into detail on these. All of these are detailed in my video about the Kyle case and breaking down the evidence. I'll link that in the description. But I'm just going to real quickly hit some highlights here of evidence that contradicts the idea that he was there to shoot looters and he was acting as a vigilante and he was there with that same state of mind. Definitely some evidence that contradicts it. First, there were many crimes taking place the night of the shootings, and yet Kyle never once started shooting. If his state of mind was, I see people committing crimes including looting, robbing, stealing, arson, setting things on fire, violent activity, I see that, I want to shoot. If that was his state of mind going into the protest, then why did he not open fire on people committing crimes? There were people at the gas station committing crimes. There was violence. We know that night there were people breaking car windows, doing different things. Kyle did not open fire on any of them when that was happening. So that contradicts the direct statement made in that video. Kyle clearly had a different state of mind on the night of the protest. Further, when violence did present itself, Kyle did not respond by shooting, but actually he ran away. And we'll look at that more specifically. But he ran away, right? He ran away from Rosenbaum, all them. He didn't just open fire. For a couple of things, when he was pepper sprayed that night, he did not shoot, and explicitly said he didn't have non-lethal to respond with. He didn't shoot someone who was using non-lethal force against him, which is one up from just some random person looting. No, this person pepper sprayed him using non-lethal force against him, and he didn't shoot because he didn't have non-lethal to respond with. He purposely didn't use lethal force. That indicates he knows when lethal force is justified, and it directly contradicts the idea that he just wants to open fire on anybody committing a crime. He also ran from Rosenbaum and the mob, including Huber and Gage. He didn't engage with them and just open fire. He ran away from them when they began to attack him. Didn't just open fire. Also, when other people approached him while he was on the ground, he did not shoot them when they raised their hands and did not attack. Clearly, he understood that lethal force is only justified when you are physically being attacked, and if someone is not an imminent threat, you cannot shoot. Hence the reason he didn't shoot those people. They were not an imminent threat to him. Even though they were a part of a mob violently chasing him down, he didn't shoot them. That goes directly against the idea of him being a vigilante. And then this one's a big one for me. When he was interviewed the night of the shooting, he explicitly said that the rifle was for self-defense purposes only. not to shoot looters, criminals, etc., but for self-defense purposes only.
What are you doing out here? Obviously, you're armed, and you're in front of this business we saw burning last night, so what's up?
So people are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I need to protect myself, obviously. But I also have my med kit.
He said that in an interview that very night. Now, if Binger wants to claim that a video from 15 days before, where he makes an offhand comment about wishing he had his AR to shoot people, is evidence of state of mind, then why is Binger not saying this video on the very night that he had the gun speaks to state of mind? This would speak more to his state of mind at the night of the protest than something 15 days earlier, and this video explicitly says that his state of mind was that the rifle was for self-defense purposes only, not to shoot looters, criminals, and everything else. This video directly contradicts the video from 15 days before, and this video speaks to his state of mind that night because he said it that night. This video alone debunks the video, completely debunks the video that Binger offers in this motion. There's still some outstanding questions about Binger's video as well. The location of that CVS is unknown. Multiple people, myself, I've went through all kinds of places. I've looked up every CVS in every metropolitan area, in every local city around. It's definitely a metropolitan area. You can tell from the video. Definitely metropolitan area. I've looked at all CVS's, looked at them, compared them from Google Earth and the Street View to the video. Can't find it. It's not in Kenosha, not in Antioch, Illinois, not in Racine, not in Milwaukee. It's not in Lindenhurst. It's not in any of those local places around there that I can find. It may have been found at this point, but I have not been able to find it. Johnny Walker Dread, if you follow his channel, he also has a video and he talks about that as well. So there's outstanding question of where is this CVS? And the reason that's important is because we don't actually see Kyle in this video, and we have no evidence presented in the motion that shows how we know that is actually Kyle talking. If the CVS was in Antioch, Illinois, or was in Kenosha, or in a surrounding area that we could find, it might give a little bit of credence that it probably is Kyle. But if you, right, we don't know where that is. That could be in California for all we know, and be somebody else completely different who just kind of sounds like Kyle. If we don't know where the CVS is, we don't have any evidence to prove that's actually Kyle speaking. Why should this be admitted as evidence? And you, now, before we go any further, you may say, well, yes, Binger knows though that it's Kyle. He's confirmed that. Well, has he? And how do you know that? He didn't put any evidence or even a statement of how he would prove that it was Kyle. He didn't even do that in his emotion. We have no way of knowing how he knows this is Kyle. So there's some outstanding questions that need to be answered about the video itself. But even if it is Kyle, as I've already proven in this video, it's a completely irrelevant video, and it does not harm Kyle or his case to self-defense. That's been our Kyle Rittenhouse update. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're getting value out of these Kyle Rittenhouse videos, hit the like button. Comment down below, what do you think about this video? And let's keep the discussion going down in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this. Until next time.
Thanks so much for watching. For more videos, click subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you enjoyed the video, click that like button. See you next time.